Final Fantasy IX is a timeless masterpiece. It has emotional gravitas, political intrigue, and Vivi. Yeah, he's literally the best. But someone's shitting my soup, so right now I'm not interested in showering praise upon this game. Instead, I want to talk about this game's worst character. The criteria, of course, being whatever I want, because it's my video and not yours. And believe it or not, there are 4 characters in contention for the worst character in Final Fantasy IX. Playable characters, by the way. NPCs are not included in this video. Sorry, Jump Rope Kids. Sorry, Hapal. Anyway, as I alluded to, I ruled out 4 characters almost immediately. Zidane, Vivi, Steiner, and Freya are all incredible contributors to combat. Zidane's pillaging provides a ton of useful items that empower other characters, making them more able to do their jobs. And his trance turns all of his abilities into massive nukes. Vivi's black magic is a lifesaver, and with his ultimate weapon, he gets the Doomsday spell. This does massive shadow elemental damage to both the party and the enemy, which can allow everyone to heal while he wrecks shit. And during his trance, he can do that twice in 1 turn. Freya gets Dragon Quest. That is not what I meant to write there. Freya gets Dragon Crest, which guarantees a hit of 9999 once it's set up. And that doesn't take too long if you just kill a bunch of dragons. Steiner, sadly, really only gets the ability to whack stuff, but he whacks stuff real hard, particularly in Trance, where he just gets a flat triple damage to his physical attacks. And in terms of story, all 4 of these characters have ample characterization. Each of them also has their own separate side stories that continue throughout the game. Except Freya, I guess, whose narrative arc peters out on disc 1, but we give her a pass because she's a hot rat girl. So that leaves 4 characters. Maybe 5. Technically 5, I guess, not including Tantacles. Quina, I think, gets a pass, mainly because of their blue magic. A couple of their spells in particular can break Final Fantasy IX wide open. I beat this game with only Quina, and I'll link that video in the descriddly-do, but early access to Auto Life in particular is hugely enabling, mainly because Quina also gets access to Limit Glove, a spell that does 9999 damage, but only if the user is at 1 HP. Priceless, particularly in my level 1 challenge, which I discreetly do, and Garnet. Worth talking about because throughout a lot of the game, Garnet's combat is utter dog water. She starts the game as a dedicated white mage and technically has access to some powerful summons, but the magic point cost is ridiculously high because reasons. But eventually, after having her powers drained out of her by her power-hungry Dami Mommy, she reclaims her summons and becomes a lot more viable. Until, of course, her own summon destroys her home and leaves her forlorn and mute. And if I had a nickel for every time that happened to be, I'd be broke. That's never happened to me. Let me know if it's happened to you in the comments. Wow. And sadly, while mute, a certain percentage of her actions will fail, but weirdly, her summons actually have a 90% chance of success. In any case, even though Garnet takes a while to heal, and is almost completely useless while she's getting therapy and a haircut, this concordance between her story beats and her abilities is an incredible example of ludonarrative resonance. Side note, I feel like people talk about ludonarrative dissonance a lot, but not enough about ludonarrative resonance. That's a mismatch between gameplay and narrative elements. Ludonarrative resonance, on the other hand, is the opposite, when gameplay elements and narrative components bolster each other. I am constantly frustrated by games where the protagonist is more or less powerful than they should be, and some sort of weak justification is given for that. The best example of this is in the Metroid series, in which literally every game features an underpowered Samus Aran at the beginning of each game, but a super buff and dominating Samus by the end. Some of the games offer an explanation for her getting powered down. I think Metroid Fusion does this particularly well. Samus is infected by X-Parasite, and much of her power suit has to be removed surgically, leaving her with a fraction of her former power. Metroid Prime tries to do this by having Samus get wrecked by an explosion, but her power suit was already far less powerful than it was in previous iterations from the outset, which doesn't make much sense. And Metroid Other M, well, that one's just random men telling her not to use her most powerful gadgets.
You don't move unless I say so, and you don't fire until I say so.
A fail for feminism, for sure. Anyway, the approach to Garnet in Final Fantasy IX is unique, albeit frustrating for the player. Garnet's trauma is not only a fitting reason for a girl power nerf, but is also shockingly similar to how I feel every winter. 40% of the time, I'm just going to lie there, and you cannot change that. So anyway, Garnet is saved from being the worst character by her story beats. Also, her summons are powerful. That's good. Anyway, that leaves just 2 characters. Amarant and Eiko. And plot-wise, Eiko is the clear winner. She's annoying as fuck, but her story is incredibly well defined. As a resident of the Summoner Village, she helps Garnet realize they're of the same ill-fated origin. And with the help of Garnet as well as the 4 sacred gems, she summons Alexander, who is probably the only reason the city of Alexandria wasn't completely destroyed. Not to mention, she is friends with literally all of the Mughals, which shows incredible taste in comrades. Look at them, they're so cute. And while I know this is going to give away the ending, her combat is also far better than Amarant's. I would argue that in terms of combat, she's even better than Garnet is. She never has a major depressive episode, and Garnet's only form of offense is summons. Whereas Eiko starts out with access to summon magic, gets more powerful summon magic, and then gets the holy spell. And then she even gets the Medine summon, which is a complete nuke and makes me wonder why they gave Eiko 2 of the very rare sources of holy damage in this game and gave Garnet Bupkiss. And Eiko's trance even doubles her white magic ability, allowing her to hit enemies hard with double holy, or heal the party and strike out at the same time. Tons more versatility than Garnet. And again, really annoying. And you know who's also annoying and sadly has nothing going on in terms of story? General Beatrix. Just kidding. She's awesome. Just wanted to let you guys know that I didn't forget about her. I also didn't forget about the Tantacles troop, but they're in the game for like 3 seconds and they're actually kind of funny. Anyway, the worst character in Final Fantasy IX is Amarant. When you first meet Amarant, he's hired by Queen Braun, Garnet's loving mother, who also constantly tries to kill her as a bounty hunter. And that is essentially his backstory. Well, okay, not quite. Before he became a bounty hunter, he was a security guard in the city of Trano. Zidane stole a valuable item from Amarant's employer and subsequently framed Amarant for the crime. And Amarant became one of Gaia's most wanted. That's it. That's literally all we know about him. He hates Zidane because Zidane framed him, and for some reason, this slight has led him to be obsessed with Zidane, which I would totally understand if Zidane were hot or something, but Zidane has a stupid-looking ugly face, so I am not in support of this courtship. We also learn that Amarant thinks children are cool when he stops Lonnie, the other bounty hunter who was hired alongside him and is far more interesting, from holding Eiko hostage. Seriously, Lonnie should have just joined the party. That would have made much more sense. Justice for Lonnie. And that's his story. He's a quiet dude who says very little and does very little outside of combat. Except one more thing. A few dungeons after he joins the party, he abandons your party during the mission to Ibsen's castle. A mission in which he actually would have been quite useful. Let me just put this out there again. He joins the party almost halfway through the game and then just disappears for seemingly no reason beyond I can do this better than you. Which he can't. He gets injured and has to be rescued. And then he basically has nothing else of substance to do for the entire game. So his combat had better be amazing. And I'm gonna be honest, his combat is just okay. It's not awful. He can throw shit. I'm not saying he throws shit. He can throw shit, like stuff. He can throw things, weapons, stuff. And I like that. And his thrown items can do a ton of damage. Of course, at a cost, but hey, damage is damage. However, as an environmentalist, I prefer to use renewable resources whenever possible. Like magic points, which, as I discussed just a minute ago, can often guarantee a damage-capped hit. Or more if you double cast with Vivi or Eiko. And he does in fact have some abilities that use MP, his flare abilities. But unfortunately, these abilities generally have pretty big drawbacks. Chakra, for example, can restore some health and restore a sliver of magic points. But why not just use a white mage to cure everyone's health and then stay at an inn or use a tent? Curse can inflict a random elemental weakness on an enemy. But Vivi and Eiko, the two characters who do much of the elemental damage in this game, often don't need the enemy to be weak against their spells to deal massive damage. The one ability of his I find truly helpful is Aura. This gives a character regen and auto life. And in his trance, his abilities gain area of effect, so Aura can do this for the entire party. But this actually presented a problem in one of my challenges. As I mentioned before, Quina's Limit Glove activates at 1 HP and only at 1 HP. And after being auto-revived, Quina was naturally at 1 HP. But using Aura on Quina gave them the regen status, which ruined my ability to use Limit Glove and caused a game over. And I mean, that's very specific, but it still pissed me off. And if I'm being absolutely fair, his spare change ability is actually really cool, and it can be used to cheese Tantarian, one of the game's optional bosses. But that's not enough. Amarant is the worst playable character in this game, and while I want to say it's not even close, there is some nuance to it. So if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments, and watch some more. Just watch more videos here. It's fine. Final Fantasy videos all here. Level 1 challenge, maybe? That'd be fun.